Every story leaves something behind. A whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves. 3 true school lockdown horror stories, submitted by real viewers. These are their experiences in their own words. This first story was sent in by a former high school teacher in Ohio. He calls it the intercom that gave the wrong code. What makes this one stick with me is the idea that someone studied the lockdown system and used it against them. The code word that came over the intercom wasn't ours. I know that because I helped pick it. Every year at the start of the semester, our principal would choose a lockdown phrase, something innocuous that wouldn't alarm students but would tell staff to secure their rooms. That year it was Blue Harvest. What came over the speakers at 1:47 on a Wednesday afternoon was Red Chapel. Nobody on staff recognized it. I was a second-year English teacher at a mid-sized high school in eastern Ohio, the kind of building that was built in the 70s and added onto 3 times since. So the layout made no sense. Hallways dead-ended into other hallways. Stairwells opened into corridors that looped back on themselves. Even after a year there, I still sometimes took a wrong turn. When Red Chapel came over the intercom, I looked at my colleague Mrs. Deering through the shared door between our classrooms. She mouthed the words back to me with a question on her face. I shook my head. That wasn't the code, but the tone was right. It was our principal's voice, Dr. Leland, calm, and measured the way he always was during drills. So we followed procedure. Lights off, door locked, students against the interior wall, away from the windows. 26 kids sat on the floor in silence while I crouched by the door and listened. At first there was nothing. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Not running, not the hurried pace of a teacher getting to their room. These were measured, almost patient. They stopped outside my door. I could see the shadow break the light under the door frame. Whoever it was stood there for maybe 10 seconds. Then the handle moved. Not jiggled, not yanked, just tested, gently, like someone checking whether it would open. It held. The shadow moved on. A minute later, the intercom clicked again. Dr. Leland's voice said all clear. Resume normal activity. I didn't move. Something told me to wait. I'm glad I did, because 30 seconds later the real announcement came. This time from our vice principal, Mrs. Torres. She said we were in a lockdown. A real one. She used the correct code. Blue Harvest. It lasted 2 hours. Police swept the building. They found that someone had accessed the intercom system from a maintenance closet near the boiler room. The closet had been locked, but the lock had been removed and replaced with one that looked identical but used a different key. Someone had planned this. They'd recorded or mimicked Dr. Leland's voice. They'd used a fake code to get us to lock down early, then walked the halls testing doors. They never found who it was. No cameras covered that part of the building. What keeps me up at night is the all clear. Whoever it was didn't just want in. They wanted us to open our doors again before the real lockdown started. And I almost did. The next story comes from a woman who worked the front office at a middle school in Arizona. This one is called The Substitute in Room 114. What disturbs me most about this one is how prepared he was. There was a man in room 114 that nobody had called for. I was working the front office at a middle school in Glendale, Arizona, handling attendance and visitor check-ins. It was a Tuesday in late October, and we had 3 substitutes on the schedule. I checked them all in by 7:45. At around 10:15, a teacher from the science wing walked into the office looking confused. She said there was a man in room 114 teaching a class. Room 114 was supposed to be empty. The regular teacher, Mr. Rowan, was out for a family emergency, and we hadn't been able to find a sub for his classes. His students were supposed to be split among other teachers for the day. I pulled up the schedule on my screen. She was right. No substitute was assigned to 114. I figured maybe there was a mix-up. Maybe the district sent someone and forgot to notify us. It happened sometimes. I walked down to the science wing to sort it out. Through the narrow window in the door, I could see a man standing at the front of the classroom. He was tall, mid-40s maybe, wearing slacks and a button-down. He had a lanyard around his neck with what looked like an ID badge. The students were sitting quietly, notebooks open. He was writing something on the whiteboard. I knocked and stepped in. I asked him his name and told him I just needed to verify his paperwork. He smiled and said of course, said his name was Gary and the district had sent him that morning. He reached into a messenger bag on the desk and handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a substitute assignment sheet. It had the school's name, the date, Mr. Rowan's name, room 114. It looked almost right, but the letterhead was slightly off. The font was wrong, and the authorization signature at the bottom was a name I didn't recognize. I told him I'd be right back and walked straight to the office. I told the principal what I'd found. She called the district. They had not sent anyone. She called our resource officer. Within 5 minutes, we were in lockdown. The officer and 2 Glendale PD, who arrived fast, approached room 114 together. When they opened the door, the students were still sitting there. The man was gone. The messenger bag was gone. The whiteboard had been erased. He'd left through the emergency exit at the back of the science wing, the one that was supposed to trigger an alarm. The alarm had been disabled. Not broken, disabled. Someone had removed the battery from the contact sensor. When they interviewed the students, most of them said he'd been nice, friendly. He'd asked them questions about their schedules, their after-school activities, what time their parents usually picked them up. One girl said he'd asked her specifically which door her mom used for pickup and whether she waited in the car or came inside. The police investigated for weeks. They pulled footage from the parking lot cameras, but the angle didn't cover the science wing exit. The assignment sheet he'd given me had no fingerprints on it other than mine. They never identified him. And what I keep coming back to is how calm he was when I walked in. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't caught off guard. He smiled, like he'd been expecting me. This last story is the hardest one to narrate. It was sent in by a woman who was a junior in high school when this happened, at a small school in rural Pennsylvania. She calls it the list in the ceiling tile. I'll warn you now, this one stays with you. During a lockdown drill my junior year, I found a list of names hidden in the ceiling. I need to tell this carefully because even now, 7 years later, parts of it are still hard to talk about. I was 16, a junior at a high school in rural western Pennsylvania. Small town, maybe 4,000 people, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and nothing ever happened. We had lockdown drills twice a year, and nobody took them seriously. That day we were in Mr. Kessler's biology room on the 2nd floor. When the announcement came, the 30 of us shuffled to the corner of the room by the supply closet like we always did. Someone made a joke. Someone else was on their phone. Mr. Kessler closed the blinds and locked the door and sat at his desk reading. I was sitting on the floor with my back against the wall, beneath a row of cabinets. I was bored, looking up at the ceiling, and I noticed one of the tiles above me was slightly out of place. Not by much, just a centimeter or so, shifted to the side. I don't know why I reached up. I just did. I pushed the tile up and to the left the way I'd seen maintenance workers do, and something fell out. It landed on my lap. It was a folded piece of notebook paper, college ruled, torn from a spiral binding. I unfolded it. There were names on it, 14 names, written in neat black ink. Every single one was a student at our school. I recognized all of them. My name was 7th on the list. Next to each name was a number. At first I thought they were phone numbers, but they were too short, just 3 or 4 digits. It took me a moment. They were room numbers, classroom numbers in our building, and next to the room numbers were times, written in military format: 0805, 0930, 1015, 1200. I looked at my entry. My name, room 207, which was Mr. Kessler's room, and the time was 1015. I looked at the clack on the wall. It was 10:12. The drill had started at 10:10. My hand started shaking. I showed it to the girl next to me, Brianna. She was on the list too. She went pale and grabbed my arm. I got up and went to Mr. Kessler. I handed him the paper. I watched his face as he read it. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he stood up and told everyone to stay exactly where they were and stay quiet. He used the classroom phone to call the front office. The drill ended, but we didn't leave. 20 minutes later, there were police officers in the hallway. They evacuated our room first, then the rest of the building. We were sent home. School was closed for 3 days. They found more lists, 2 more, hidden in ceiling tiles in other classrooms on other floors. Same handwriting, same format, names, room numbers, times. 41 names total across the 3 lists. Every time on every list corresponded to a period when that student would be in that specific room. According to their current class schedule, someone had studied the schedules carefully. The police traced the handwriting. They matched it to a student. I won't say his name because the case involved a minor, and I don't know what happened legally after, but I knew him. Everyone did. He was quiet. He sat alone. He was in my biology class. He'd been sitting 8 feet from me during that drill, against the opposite wall. When I think about it now, what gets me isn't the list. It's the fact that he hid it directly above where we'd sit during lockdowns. He knew exactly where each of us would be, even when we were hiding. That's going to do it for tonight. Lock your doors and stay safe.
And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.